Hello and welcome to the actual Friday night stream of the Untitled Anarchist Seagull channel. The stream that I almost did yesterday by accident because I had convinced myself somehow that it was Friday yesterday, only to find out when there were only 4 minutes until it was actually Friday that it wasn't. Somehow I have managed to keep my electric coming from the mains despite the ice storm. And so we're doing this thing. How's the audio? You hearing me okay? Is the music too loud or anything? Excellent, excellent. Okay. So, one thing that I've been noticing as I sort of pay attention to language YouTube and, sort of the online polyglot world, is a lot of people really get into discussing their language learning routine. Like, not in terms of method, but in terms of number of hours per day, number of days per week, this sort of thing. Strict scheduling and stuff. And that makes absolutely no fucking sense to me. I can see where they got it from, because this is the bullshit we learn in school, which is probably why there's so little of lasting value that we learn in school, certainly in school language classes for the most part. I have never had a language learning routine. I mean, I've been teaching myself languages for roughly 37 years now. Done really reasonably well at it, I'd have to say. Never once had a fucking routine. Never had a schedule. My entire routine is I do it when I feel like it. I expose myself passively to all sorts of languages I'm interested in all the time through music and TV shows I watch and movies and whatever I'm reading at a given time. And in a more active way whenever I just sort of feel like it, and when I stop feeling like it, I stop, I give it a miss, I do something else, and I wait until the mood strikes me again. And what's really remarkable about this is that, without knowing it, since I'd never heard of him until fairly recently, what I have come up with is the method that is supported by about 40 years of research by one of the leading specialists in language acquisition, a guy by the name of Steve Krashen. Great videos explaining all this, but what he came up with from studying successful cases of language acquisition over a very long period of time was that what you need is comprehensible input. It has to be really interesting. It has to be interesting enough that it holds your attention without you making a special effort to pay attention to it. Like, compelling is the word that he uses. And it needs to be a zero stress environment to the extent possible. Stress and language learning do not go together, it turns out. Which is to say, the exact opposite of the shit we learn that language learning is in school. And I think a lot of people who sort of decide to teach themselves languages sort of take this sort of grind approach that they learn and they just feel absolutely, they feel like that's like the one way to do it, because, that there's got to be a reason all these teachers learn it, who have between them maybe taught 1/4 of the Spanish language, or whatever. I mean, it's practically a cliche that people do very well in 4 years of high school Spanish, go on to do 4 years of Spanish at uni, still can't even order a fucking beer. And it has a lot to do with this method that has become conventional wisdom. So, anyone who's thinking about trying to learn a language and is thinking they need to stress out on this bullshit, don't. Do it, just do what you feel like. Expose yourself to it, to whatever your language is, in the way that's most interesting to you, and when you get sick of it for a while, stop so it never gets old. If you're burning out on it, you are actually definitely doing it wrong. Although it's understandable that you do it that way because we're taught that this is the way it's supposed to be. I just never listened to anyone who said that, which is why I've got 20 working languages. Well, one of the reasons, anyway. So, yeah. That's a bit of free language learning advice that is inspired by stuff that I saw on language-related Twitter today. So many people burning out over something that they actually got into because they wanted to do it. And that's just sad. I mean, that just really sucks. And it's totally unnecessary. Okay, let's play a little bit of Rapid. Haven't done that in a bit. Okay. Oh, telephone. Oh, somebody playing the English. I don't get that often. Play the most annoying variant that you can play against the English, which is the symmetrical English. A nice wee botphonic system in there. And so, did you get any ice up in Minnesota or wherever? Forget whether it's Wisconsin or Minnesota, one of the very cold places with unusual ways of describing drinking fountains. Okay, what are we doing here? Okay. Oh, quite theory intensive. Okay, that works for me. I was actually kind of hoping for that. Now, are we taking my F-pawn, or am I taking your E-pawn? Okay. Trade those knights. Or not, interesting. Okay. Not sure what the point of this is. Oh no, that wouldn't be a good idea. Okay, the bishop pair is still in both of our hands, and neither of us have any knights. Okay. Just give nothing, just keep the tension up. No, I don't want to do that. That just fucks up my pawn structure in the end. On the other hand... Okay. Or none of us can have the bishop pair. I can do it that way too. Okay, neither of us has the bishop pair. Nobody's getting a bishop pair. Yeah, I was a bit late starting today as well. For ridiculous reasons. Absolutely just absurd reasons. Because I was getting everything set up, and my mouse, which I'm not entirely used to using a mouse again. It's been a while since I actually relied on one of those. It sort of fell off the little mouse, like, lap desktop that I carry around with my keyboard and space for my mouse and stuff. Bounced off and I couldn't find it. There aren't all that many places it could even go, but somehow I was able to lose it in this space of time. Checked under everything. There are a few places it can end up under. Couldn't find it. Actually started to panic a wee bit. And it turned out to be in the most inaccessible corner under the bed, and fuck knows how it managed that. It really didn't have that kind of time. Okay, yeah, that. To do that, let me see here. So that happens, and I'm taking... Yeah, actually, I think that sucks shit. I'm not gonna do that. We're going to instead just ratchet up the tension on this position. Since there's not a whole lot. Well, actually, they've got a bit more that they can do than I'm doing. Than I've got. So they can, you know, they can push here. That's not too bad. Push here. Caused me some problems there. They're in a slightly better situation in terms of available decent moves than I am. But not all that much better. I mean... They actually would probably want to keep all of this roughly the way it is. And I want them to be the ones taking because I like my pawn structure and I'd like to keep it that way, more or less. Oh, wait. They moved. Oh, that changes things. No, it actually doesn't. That was a bad move. Yes, you could take with the rook and then that whole thing was bloody pointless. Well, I mean... It gave away a piece, so there was a point if you were my opponent, but for me it wasn't great. For me it really could have been better. No, don't want to do that. This isn't bad, though. Sorry. Okay. And that bishop is pinned. Okay. That's an improvement on where we were a minute ago. I had actually considered that sequence of exchanges, but it didn't look good, specifically because the queen was there to take back the rook that I was aiming to get my hands on. And then the queen got moved, and suddenly the rook was actually hanging. Ah, was that a resignation? Okay, good game, GG. Okay. Let's get back to the train wreck. Oh, hello, oh, hi, Andromeda Echo! Yeah, that seems like the chat it lagged seriously. Oh, snow but no ice. We got dumped huge amounts. I've never seen ice like this before. Ah, link spam too. Hello, link spam. Everybody's hello, Adam. Yeah, there was a lag on Restream just now, I think. But everything seems to have shown up now. Hello, everybody. Good to see you. Yeah, I got here 10 minutes earlier than anyone noticed that I was here because I lost my fucking mouse. Which I didn't even... which was impressive considering the small amount of space that it could have been in. Yeah. Oh, there's a link? What's it to? Let me see. I got Twitter open. Or you can... Vosh argued for... No, okay, admittedly, I will say this is not the most shocking piece of news that I've heard today. I mean, but... Okay, is that what this link is? Okay, that's topical. Why don't we do that? I mean, we've already seen Xanderhole. Okay, let's see. Here we go. Do what I was hoping to see Xanderhole do. And just pop this up for a second. See what I'm looking at. Okay. Just look at this clip.
Thing. I feel like...
Okay, change windows.
Threats.
Okay. This is just a 45-second clip, but it's quite topical given that Joe Biden has decided to follow on his successful, absolutely disastrous, complete fucking up of the COVID response by starting a war with Russia in the winter. And, of course, this is the sort of thing that Foch has to be on side with.
Actual geopolitical threats.
You hear it okay?
Will change anything. I feel like the only thing we can do at this point is starve Russia out.
Okay, first of all, who's we? I like how, I mean, I always find it a bit weird when people who say they're leftists talk about the ruling class, a club that they are most certainly not in, as we, like they're actually in on the discussion. Like, I mean, especially in this, yeah.
We're wealthier than them by metrics. I mean, ally with all the countries in their periphery, sanction their leaders, cripple their economy, wait for them to bleed out, and then when they're ready to play ball, they can be
Jeez.
a nice.
What the? I mean, okay. So, I love how we've gotten to the point where nobody even. It's like nobody remembers. The last time I remember a serious discussion of what these so called sanctions actually do was in the 1990s when it was Iraq. And that was like the last time that there seemed to be any sort of consensus on the left that maybe deliberately starving people out might be a bad thing. And that's just been sort of chiseled away at to the point where I've seen people try to deny. Oh yeah, I mean, occasionally he sounds like a good white nationalist too. He's just sort of an all-purpose asshole. Foch is. I mean, where I've seen people who I would otherwise consider leftists talking about how, oh, it's just it's Iranian propaganda that the sanctions on Venezuela are causing people to starve. It's like they're deliberately targeting the financing streams for Venezuela's fucking anti-poverty programs. Even opposition leaders, people who are on side with the U.S. puppet dickhead that nobody heard of until he decided to declare himself president at the urging of Mike Pence, Juan Guaido, say that these sanctions are murdering people and they should stop. But, you know, there are... I actually, whoever's running the Libcom Twitter account, this is months ago, maybe they've actually given some thought to it and realized how fucked up this is. We're trying to deny that that had anything to do with the fact that Venezuela had gone from actually being in pretty good economic shape to being absolutely disastrous, almost as bad as it was pre-1998, when it was absolutely horrific, which we're also supposed to forget. And, I mean, now we just sort of casually talk about starving people out. I mean, first of all, when was the last time anyone successfully starved Russia out of anything? Just apart from just how fucking evil that is. Like, what the hell? I mean, Russia is a little bit big. They have they've got long coastlines on two major oceans. Yeah, he seems to be very keen on that. Because, okay, so Russia's just going to sort of take this sitting down, are they? They're just going to say, oh, well, fair play to you. I guess we're just going to fucking die. And, no, they're not. And meanwhile, when we talk about this, we have to remember that the whole thing, the U.S. has been provoking the shit out of Russia for basically like 30 years now. Well, yes, Russia has nukes. They've also got a pretty big army. And at the moment, they've got a bit of a reason to be pissed off. I mean, if Russia and China and Iran had joint military exercises just south of Winnipeg or maybe around Nogales, on the Mexican half of Nogales, yeah, you think Washington would take that sitting down? Well, not just, I mean, and Woodrow Wilson, too. Remember, Woodrow Wilson was part of that disastrous attempt to invade Russia after the revolution to try to intervene on the side of the Tsar, and the whole thing fell apart, not least because their own soldiers started going on strike and refusing to fight because they'd been promised they could go home after World War I was done. I mean, this is so fucking ridiculous. Oh, and we've still got 20 seconds to go to see what other fucked up shit he says.
Compliant country.
I mean, but there's a lot of civilians that get hurt in that scenario.
In eastern Ukraine as well, yeah. But if they're going to be like
sanctions
that,
on Russia.
Oh, wait a second. He's just going to dismiss there's a lot of civilians that get hurt?
Is what I'm saying. That would hurt a lot of civilians.
not as much as their missile strikes would hurt Eastern Ukrainians, right?
What missile strikes? I mean, he's just making up scenarios now. I mean, Russia has actually, and it's interesting, if you read the media in languages other than English, and I'm not talking about media that are actually particularly friendly towards Russia normally, if you the mood in Europe is, what the fuck is this? Putin is offering suggestions for how to de-escalate this situation. Why is the U.S. just ignoring this and going hell-bent on escalating a situation that cannot possibly end well for anyone? I mean, and he's talking about... So he just takes all that for granted. I mean, like the fact that NATO was not supposed to be expanded 1 inch, that was James Baker's formulation, beyond its current borders in exchange for the reunification of Germany. Never mind that NATO shouldn't have existed. I mean, and as fucked up as NATO was before 1989, now it has an explicit doctrine of aggressive war in order to secure access to strategic resources. And that's been deployed that way multiple times, including very recently over a 20-year occupation of Afghanistan. There's literally no justification for having NATO, and in fact, just as a matter of international law, it doesn't have a right to exist. The UN Charter bans organizations that specifically exist to violate international law, to the extent that matters, which of course it fucking doesn't. But yes, of course Russia is going to feel a little bit provoked by all this. And so he's not, and now Foch, what's remarkable about this is there is the dovish position, the dovish liberal imperialist position, which is what is being taken in much of Western Europe, which is, let's try to find a way to de-escalate this because the consequences would be bad. Not really raising the issue of the legitimacy of anything NATO has done or is contemplating, but just saying de-escalation seems like maybe a good idea here. And what he's taking here, what Foch is taking, is the most hawkish position on this. I mean, short of outright calling for a land invasion.
Again, keep in mind, this isn't out of spite. If actual geopolitical...
It isn't out of spite? Well, then what is it? Jesus Christ. Okay, thank you for that. That is fucked. Okay. And I think we're going to continue with Foch for a little bit. I've got another one. This is, did I go too hard? Convo with non-compete fan. Was he too hard on endorsing literal Nazi talking points? But was the audio on that video okay? Do I need to turn that up at all? Can I just type a... Just doing that to see if there are any tweets, messages in chat. How are you doing, by the way, Andromeda Echo? Sorry I didn't see you, but Restream was doing a thing. Okay. The Vosh Pit. I believe that's what they call the thing that you dig to put your septic tank in. That's where it gets that.
Howdy.
Can you hear me? I'm just muting your stream.
I can hear you just...
That's a good thing to do with his stream. Already, just critical support to Vosh Viewer there.
It's fine.
Awesome. So, I am a sort of... or was maybe a sort of casual non-compete fan leading up to your debate. I thought it was kind of silly that he, didn't have an ethical framework, I guess, or couldn't answer those questions.
But he had an ethical framework. It wasn't that he couldn't answer the questions. He was pointing out they were ridiculous questions. Because they were ridiculous questions.
But I think I see some of the rifts that form between you and other people that are more conventionally in, like, the BreadTube video essay sphere, and wanted to maybe explain a couple of them. Oh, and my pronoun...
not agreeing with Nazi propaganda. That's a rift. Our humidifier here is dead, and so my hair is full of static.
Or he, him for chat.
Oh my God, you know the etiquette and everything. What a start. Yeah. All right, hit me up.
So the first thing I wanted to ask was just your broad take on like hypotheticals in grounded political discussion as illuminating versus obscuring. Obviously, the people who'd reject hypotheticals as never having any use in developing an ethical system, that's pretty silly.
Okay, let's just pause a second. Okay, see if we can get to something more specific, because this is okay. Professional flowers and decom. I read it. What can Vosh do better? Non-compete in Vicios, lefty econ takes money. Wait, not surprisingly, there is not a section here titled maybe it's not a good thing to endorse literal Nazi propaganda, but there we go. So let's see. Thoughts on hypotheticals. Let's just go with that.
There's some instances in which they can prevent moving forward on the meat of more real-world issues. So
which is kind of the point of them when Vosh is deploying
mentioned in
them.
the email was like the Sam Harris v. Noam Chomsky exchange, where Sam Harris would talk about, oh, what if the U.S. government was actually benevolent in like the Al Shifa chemical plant?
Yeah, this is
bombings, and it's like, well, that's not what happened. And
yeah, and actually that's a very good example of the same sort of hypotheticals. I mean, and the amazing thing about that exchange, which if you haven't read it, read it, it's good. Because Sam Harris and his stands seem to actually think he didn't look like a complete ass at the end of it, despite the fact that he clearly couldn't even comprehend the terms of the discussion. But that's a very good example, although that wasn't a hypothetical. What Harris actually said was that it was okay to destroy Phoenix Rising, to destroy the pharmaceuticals complex, because the specific intent was not to murder tens of thousands of people by denying them access to necessary drugs. Oh, yes, he is. And Chomsky said, actually, that doesn't make it better. It does not make it better if you do not even register that the human beings you're going to be killing are actual human beings that you have to form some kind of an intent towards, because that means you're considering these people on the level of, like, ants that you don't even notice as you're walking down the street and you're stepping on them. And Harris didn't know what the fuck to do with that, said a bunch of stuff. He tried to find some way to distract from that, and just ended up looking like an ass. But, so, I mean, that's actually a very analogous situation to Foch.
I feel just more in the context of, like, canvassing, rounding people up, like, to go knock on doors in general. Are you really going to, like, stop every volunteer and grill them on, you know, are you logically consistent? Why do you think the Holocaust is wrong? So I was just wondering...
Well, for a good question to start out with for Foch, since you buy into the Nazi propaganda that justified the Holocaust, and seem to be explicitly positing the Holocaust as an act of self-defense, in that horrible stream, that we finished watching last week, do you even think the Holocaust is wrong? Or are we misunderstanding him completely when he compares decolonization to the Holocaust? Is he maybe saying decolonization good, Holocaust good, maybe that's where he's coming from on this. I mean, knowing that he seems to actually buy into the justification for it.
Your take on that generally?
Well, hypotheticals are really good for testing moral consistency or for describing ethical systems, because when you're dealing with ethical conundrums, it's really good to isolate variables.
See, this is the honest usage of hypotheticals, i.e. the way the hypotheticals are not used in the Vosh pit.
Talking about real-world problems, there are always a bunch of really murky kind of side details that can...
Yes, and you have to know about them. You have to actually do your fucking research. Oh, I haven't seen this one. Aina? Who's... I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with that name.
Judgment. Also, we don't have perfect info on things that happen in the real world. Even things we think we have perfect info on, we can't, really.
There are some people who have somehow managed, going on a century after the fact not to know that it was a lie when the Nazis said that Jews controlled the banks.
If you're talking about a hypothetical, though, you can control for all of that and just talk exclusively about a given idea. I think that's useful. In terms of, like, real practical political consideration, I do think that there's an issue with kind of meaningless hypothetical pontificating as a way of running away from the actual point at hand.
This is, i.e., literally his complete MO. This is all he ever does with hypotheticals. I haven't seen a good faith hypothetical from him yet.
You know, I see a lot of this done when it comes to like LGBTQ stuff, right? Where this is kind of like the slippery slope thing. Like conservatives will be like, okay, well, how would you like you say consent matters. Okay, well, what about like gay marriage? What if it's like pedophiles next, or bestiality, or whatever?
Yes. We'll leave aside what Foch thinks about pedos in the first place, but. Yeah, I mean, slippery slope argument's interesting example because that was, like, literally what he was saying about decolonization. I mean, his whole thing on decolonization is, yeah, I mean, I guess you could say colonialism is kind of bad, okay, but if you give those people, like, their freedom, then what if they decide to use it to murder all the people who were colonizing them? Wouldn't that be really bad? And I'm going to now attribute the belief that that's a good idea to you. I mean, that was his whole fucking thing.
Because a slippery slope really is a kind of, I mean, hypothetical, right? It's a way of, suggesting or testing the idea that if you go down a road, like these hypothetical situations might emerge down the line. The issue is with the non-compete thing, the only reason the hypotheticals came up was because non-compete basically called me a pedophile.
No, okay. Wow, he's lying again. See, he lied in the stream saying that Luna Ui had called him a pedo, which she didn't. She simply quoted him saying that, child sex abuse was maybe good for the kids sometimes. And he insisted that that's the same thing as calling him a pedo, and non-compete said that it wasn't, because non-compete lives on the same planet as the rest of us and is dealing in reality, where words actually are the thing, mean things, and can't just be deliberately, misleadingly interpreted in order to make a liar of somebody so that you can make yourself look good. And now he's just doing the exact same thing again. Jesus Christ, he is so dishonest. There ought to be a macro on his stream where every time he says something like that, it automatically queues up a replay from the stream he's talking about. You know, it's like, well, and here's what actually happened.
I was just trying to the thing that actually really bugged me there wasn't non-compete being dumb and weaselly. It was actually
because he wasn't those things.
That non-compete seemed to actively resist having it explained to him.
Because you weren't explaining anything. You moved away from trying to explain that. You just said that quoting you as saying that child sex abuse could be a good thing for the kids. Seriously, fucking said that? As saying that, as being the same thing as calling him a pedo. And then non-compete said, well, you've been inciting all these racist harassment pylons on Luna. And that's kind of fucked up. And Vosh said, well, why would that be a bad thing, basically? And then it was all hypotheticals, and somehow eventually he decided to just say some Nazi shit.
Because, like, it only took me, like, 30 seconds to explain, like, the context of the thing that Luna Oi dishonestly framed.
No, he never actually explained it, and it took way longer than that for him to obfuscate it. All he did was say, like, oh, well, anyone can cut up words from different videos and string them together and stuff, implying to anyone who's paying attention and doesn't know the way he operates that that's what happened, and that he was perhaps eventually going to show how this was supposedly done. So he just kept saying that, And, you know, in the abstract, is quite true. Anyone can cut together stuff from different videos and shit. But that isn't what happened. It was him saying the thing, and there's no context in which it would be a good thing to say. Sorry. Okay.
In the Twitter, but he spent, I think, like 8 minutes preventing me from talking about it, like interrupting
Well, yes, by which he means pointing out when what he was saying was a lie.
me when I started a sentence, or laughing me, or like trying to like pull it away, which felt to me like he was essentially just trying to take a shit and leave. You know, like don't.
Narrator. The discussion went on for well over an hour after that.
Give me a second, but like basically just like leave the implication, then run. So that bugged me, but I understand the hypotheticals can be used in a non illuminating fact.
Yes, I'm sure he understands that hypotheticals can be used in a non-illuminating manner.
Okay, that makes sense. I think some people see sometimes the way you use
That makes sense. Did you watch the fucking stream?
hypotheticals, or maybe the way you've used them in the past, and the way you kind of get like clips sometimes as being like kind of like strange sometimes. Is it okay if I ask about one of them? And I know
Strange? I see, that's a weird word. I wouldn't have used strange. They're just bullshit. I mean, he's just doing something that any like ninth grade debate club captain has already learned, namely that if you use a hypothetical and distract people's attention from the actual subject, you can create a whole universe, a fantasy universe. Imagine there's a rainbow opening up between my hands there. In which everything that you need to be true in order for you to be right is true, and then force somebody to admit that if everything that you need to be true in order for you to be right is true, then you'd be right. And that's all he does. Except he's a grown-ass man and he's still doing it.
That's a lot, and I promise not to be just trying to butch you or anything.
Get me. Kill me.
Yes. So, you know, that vegan gains clip and like the other clips where you've also talked about kind of the same point. From what I understand, your general point is people are sort of blasé about consuming certain kinds of exploitation and completely permissible with it.
Like, did he hire this guy to make it seem like he's in the same universe? Because he couldn't be feeding him more convenient lines if he tried. I mean, if they had written this together in advance, you would end up with this exact exchange, because this isn't what he did. And anyone who actually watched that and paid attention to it, rather than paying attention to how he's tried to rationalize it away, knows this.
With others. And that's what you want to stop, right?
Yes.
Okay, so I guess like
Then okay, if that's what all you wanted to do is stop people being blasé about child exploitation in industry, then explain the thing about CSA being good for the kids.
some people make me kind of view that analogy as a little bit weird because
because it isn't an analogous thing. It is not the same thing.
The way you would frame it sometimes, they're not both exactly consuming exploitation. I feel like the analogy would be more if you're buying a shirt and it's like a picture of like the child slaves like actively being beaten and like,
or if you're actually jerking off to kids being forced to work in a textile factory.
you're
I'm not familiar with vegan games.
you're using that to jerk off. Like there feels like there's more sort of degrees of separation.
Which, to the credit of the hypothetical, would not be illegal right now in the United States.
Actually, that would be illegal in the United States. I mean, if it's a photograph, it certainly is. That's possession of child porn.
I know what you're saying. This is an instance of terminal contrarianness. I blame destiny. The fundamental argument there that I made, the idea that we're very inconsistent with which kinds of unethical consumption like we're willing to condemn, because it's very difficult.
To be honest, beating off pictures of kids working in textile factories feels like Vosh's vibe. Yeah. In fact, he feels like the sort of guy who would pull out walk into a whiskey bar, pull out a fucking leather-bound volume out of his $100 messenger bag, and it's his favorite pictures of kids working in textile factories that he likes to wank to, and he's going to give you a philosophical explanation of why this is the only ethical consumption under capitalism. Well, I'd gotten that impression just from Thought Slime's video on the unnatural vegan, claiming that anti-capitalism is anti-vegan, and then turning out not to know what capitalism means, or kind of any other of the terms that she was using. Yeah, let's just say I'm not exactly shocked to hear that there might be problematic takes in the vegan world.
For us to condemn the whole supply line involves the exploitation of child workers thing, because that would take a lot of very, like...
Swayze? What, did some... Okay, now I'm very confused, because what... Oh... I was like, okay, I didn't hear anything about Patrick Swayze, Oh, got it. The unnatural vegan is Swayze. See, I've only seen that one video. See, I thought that you were saying that somehow my, hypothetical of Fosh with the leather-bound volume in the whiskey bar, somehow made you think of Roadhouse? I wasn't sure where you were any of us were going. It was a whole new magical mystery tour of shit.
Profitable industries down with it. The underlying point hasn't changed even remotely, only the way in which I express it. And that's because the way in which I expressed it used to be this...
You mean like when you decided to say that CSA? Yeah, I wasn't saying anything against Patrick Swayze. I was just confused that name just suddenly showed up in there, and it's like, that's like the only context in which I have ever heard the name Swayze. Swayze Foster sounds like that either sounds like a brewery or a diagnosis.
Kind of devil's advocate, I dare you to challenge me on this, how can you believe this but not that kind of thing. But I think that was actually like debate bro brain type stuff, because in that instance the way in which the argument was framed up...
Wait, okay, so it being debate bro type stuff makes it good?
Obfuscated the point rather than
shit, my headphones are acting weird.
Illuminating it, It was evocative, but it was evocative in a way which drew attention away from the point. Because every time...
It was also provocative of nausea.
I explained the point to someone, even like I had a Proud Boy on once.
Color me shocked that he platforms Proud Boys. I mean, these guys, these debate bro dickballs, they act like they're doing some sort of public service by debating Nazis, but the actual word for debating Nazis on your stream is platforming Nazis on your stream.
Who was implicated in the January 6th thing.
Wow.
Even after I explained it to him, he was like, well, I guess I get that, but that was...
Wait, you're explaining yourself to Nazis now, too? Yeah, no, that's not how this works. You don't explain yourself to Nazis. They have to explain themselves to you while they're picking their teeth off the pavement.
Was a dumb way of saying it, which, if that's the response that I'm getting from Proud Boys, I mean, clearly the delivery mechanism was flawed,
Wait, okay, so if Proud Boys think that something's bullshit, that means the delivery mechanism is flawed? Couldn't that also just mean that, since Proud Boys are full of shit, that, and, just generally have views on any given issue that are absolutely horrific, that maybe the Proud Boys suck? I mean, that's such a weird conclusion to draw. I mean, I agree, the delivery mechanism sucked. The idea sucked too. They both sucked shit. Absolute shit. But to come to the conclusion that because a Proud Boy wasn't convinced by something that it wasn't good? That's an interesting take for a leftist.
Yeah, I think that I definitely see the like edgy debate bro Destiny thing, because a couple times you would frame it as like
Oh, he's fucking stroking his beard like it's his pet Roomba.
not always like these are both bad, this should be bad too, but you might
Yeah, good point, Phoenix Rising. There's a global pandemic, people are trying not to get evicted, keep their utilities on, and put the food on the damn table, and this guy uses his huge platform, well, by comparison to, say, mine, which, yeah, you could fit maybe two people on, and we'd have to stand on one foot like a game of Twister, to explain why it's okay for him not to think that that pedophiles are harmful, and that he actually feels bad when Proud Boys disagree with him. This is the like seriously. This is the thing. This is somebody who he probably gets like hundreds of thousands of views. I haven't checked. Let's see how many views this shit show got. Hell. Not seeing it here. Probably quite a few. I have to get off of the, thing. The playlist page to see that. But this is what he's doing. It's just pure ego shit. I mean, I'm not gonna say that what I'm doing here is all that great. I mean, I'm still working on what I do here, but exposing somebody who claims to be a leftist and it just is mainstreaming fascist shit into the left, I would say is somewhat more of a useful thing to be doing than spending hours and hours and hours explaining why your shitty take on pedophilia wasn't actually shitty. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that should be the just final nail in the coffin for Xanderhole, really. Anything, because somebody who was a Nazi in the first place, really, the onus really is on them to show that they've actually seen that what they're doing is wrong, and what they were doing is wrong. And when they do shit like that, clearly they do not think what they were doing is wrong. They've just figured out that it's not good branding.
lead the argument before going into that with I can't think of like any moral or ethical reason why this should be illegal while the other one is, and that feels just like a weird inversion. And I get how that's kind of to provoke people, but no, I think I get what you're saying. And
well, the hope was that people would engage, right? Because
this is like an infomercial interviewer, where you have your piece of useless shit that you're gonna try to hawk to people for like $200, and you have somebody on there. So now I just want to be totally clear here. What you're saying is that this is both useful and aesthetically pleasing. Wow, tell me more about it. I mean, it's like, this isn't even softballs. This is just, like, sort of bringing him the ball on a tea trolley.
the idea would be, they would go like, yeah, of course this should be illegal, da-da-da. And then I'll go like, well then shouldn't that mean this should be illegal? But this is like...
yeah, and the thing is, again, that's where that falls apart, because, first of all, actually, slavery is illegal, even though that is in that law is honored in the breach. Technically, it's a crime of against humanity, and the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court, doing it to children is illegal in an additional way. Though that shit already is illegal. It's not being enforced because it's extremely profitable, but it is illegal. And, of course, none of this gets enforced in the U.S. because the U.S. basically ignores pretty much any of international human rights law. And, of course, it totally ignores the International Criminal Court. Yeah. Good. Keep doing it. People need to be faced with who these guys actually are. Because the fact that either of them might occasionally say something that's unobjectionable, I haven't seen. Well, no, once in a while they've said something I can't really, but it's usually something extremely trivial. But, I mean, anyone who actually watches them and thinks this shit is okay needs to be confronted with it.
This is a very naive, as non-compete would put it, a very idealist.
That's not what non-compete meant by idealism. Now, and here's the thing. Foch actually more or less accurately defined idealism in the sense that EJ was using it in that video, and now he's gone back to the Xanderhole level of just not having any concept of the idea.
Actually, closer to idealism than he seems to think the definition is. A very idealist way of looking at things. In reality, that rhetorical strategy does not beget good faith engagement.
Okay, so
with the rhetorical strategy of engaging with Foch never begets good faith engagement.
the second thing I wanted to talk about was more in line to like the Professor Flower stuff. This was another controversy.
Oh yes, where he likened decolonization to the Holocaust, which now it seems maybe he thinks is kind of okay.
See where a lot of people hated on you. I'm not here about to defend like all whiteys or colonizers or whatever, but I would.
Oh yeah, that's the thing that you really have to distance yourself from. Not the white nationalist shit he was putting out there about white genocide and that bullshit.
I was just wondering, a lot of conversations surrounding decolonization, I feel like there's a lot of, throughout history, bad faith sort of red baiting or gatekeeping. Like you could point to any disparate element, however minute, of a perfectly responsible, activist group, and find one crazy person saying something crazy and say, oh, either this group is like genocidal, or you can see this throughout history, with Allende in Chile being like called like a crazy communist socialist is going to end the world, or
wait, that's a really weird example. Because the reason that people were calling Allende a socialist, first of all, he called himself when he was in the Socialist Party, and back in those days, the Socialist Party in Chile actually was socialist. There was a legit... they legit wanted socialism. They had unrealistic ideas of how to do that, mostly involving trying to take over the capitalist state and then hoping to kind of go from there. But... it wasn't based on irresponsible people saying things. It was based on the fact that Allende actually had a plan and a mass movement behind it to assert Chilean control over the natural resources of Chile and use them for the benefit of the population. That was why Kissinger and the rest of them were freaked out. Incidentally, the fact that Boric has no intention of doing anything like that is precisely why Washington is pretty calm about his election.
With, Juan Jose Arevalo in Guatemala and Jacobo Arbenz, which is even worse because they weren't even socialists. So,
I have like two different chat windows with two different... Okay. Well, wait, what, okay, I'm just catching up on this. The demand thoughts claim apologize to the former, as in Xanderhole. Uh, apologize for what exactly? I haven't actually, I follow what he puts out there pretty closely, and I've not actually ever heard him say anything about it. Yes, good move. And, okay. Yeah, I've only heard about any of this through YouTube recommendations of Xander Hole videos, which immediately makes me suspicious of the veracity of any of it. But, so what happened? What's the deal there? Just... Okay. Now, the way that immediate grooming his fans into a harem, I mean, okay, I wouldn't... what I would take from that is that he's meant it metaphorically. Okay. And how so I take it that this accusation is believed to be false. Like, do we what I mean, obviously Xanderhole claims it is, but I now keep in mind I haven't heard any of this stuff, but I'm not immediately going to dismiss any. I've seen enough. He's just so full of shit. Wouldn't immediately dismiss anything. But okay. So he signal boosted it, and the one person he accidentally did wrong, he apologized. God, which is more than either of these two pricks. Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, that's not a great word to use. There's, like, anti-Arab, Orientalist stuff in there. Critical bread? Have to keep an eye on it. Then the apology to Xanderhole is... I mean, what's that... I assume it's because Xanderhole claims it's false, but I can't make any credibility judgments having heard none of it. So all I know is that I don't anything that Xanderhole's. If Xanderhole gave me the time of day, I'd check. Get a second opinion. Oh, okay. Wait, yeah. The idea being that it doesn't strictly meet the definition of cult? Okay. Yeah, I am not across any of this, so any links that you've got where I can sort of catch up on it.
Making sure to condone, genocide and everything, that is really, really important. You don't want a group that has that. But I was wondering if
Condemn, I assume you mean.
Sorry?
Condemn, I assume you mean.
Oh, I might have misspoken. Yeah.
No.
Well, I mean, when it comes to Fosh condoning genocide, you can't decide. Yeah, I'm not actually surprised that that would be a situation where Xanderhole fans would harass the shit out of somebody.
No,
But...
the meeting was taken, just making sure.
Okay. So yeah, I was wondering if this is just sort of like a rhetorical objection to members of the movement and wanting them to be maybe smarter and more sort of like consistent with how they advocate, or if it's something...
What movement? I mean, we're meant to take for granted here that there's some movement that Foch is part of, and I don't see it.
Something else, because some people might see this as, oh, he's talking about putting in practice like some institutional oversight designed to prevent genocide from occurring in like a developing nation. But I think like the political real
What, institutional oversight to prevent genocide? What, some sort of like inspector general who comes in, okay, with like an anti-genocide checklist every 6 months, and you've got to do an audit. I mean, what hot shit is this? He has a space on his Discord server for that. Yeah, see, I didn't know about that, and I can actually see where Mildred came up with the term that she. I can see where that comes in, because it's like, it's one thing if, you know, a parasocial relationship becomes a social relationship and something comes out of that on an individual basis. It's another thing if you have a specific area of the server where it's like, post your nudes, please. That's a kind of a creepy vibe. Ah, okay, had one.
realism of whatever oversight committee that was like put there, that's not just some like, you know, meek UN that can only respond reactively, would limit a significant degree more of their sovereignty than just, you know, whether or not they're committing a genocide or
yeah, and see, this is exactly what Lua explained in the video picking all this shit apart about the double bind that, you know, that Foch set up in that conversation, where it was like, yeah, where if you say, no, they can't do this, then the question is, in the context of self-determination and autonomy for indigenous colonized people, who says they can't do it? And the minute you say that, you're already undercutting the idea of autonomy. But if you say, well, who's to say they can't do it, in response, then it sounds like you're condoning whatever, when it's not even something that's on the fucking menu. Except in white nationalist fantasies like the ones sold by Foch.
something. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I guess I just don't know where this argument's coming from, because you can argue that, like, the Nazi Germans shouldn't have, like, done the Holocaust without somebody being like, oh, so you think that the post-World War I sanctions should have been stronger? You think they should have had, like, independent oversight from the you know, League of Nations to prevent, you know?
Well, first of all, they actually had that. They just completely circumvented it. Even in the Weimar years, they were totally circumventing it. Karl von Ossietzky, who won a Nobel Prize after Hitler took over, ended up in prison for the fact that his newspaper or journal, I forget exactly what it was, Die Weltbühne, published conclusive evidence that the German government under the Weimar Republic was illegally rearming and creating a military force well beyond the size permitted under the Treaty of Versailles, using all sorts of dodges, and he went to prison for revealing state secrets. No, of course, nothing happened to the people who were, you know, violating German law at the time by creating an illegal army. But yeah, I mean, this is so weird the way he comes back to it this way, where he seems to sort of see the Holocaust sort of from the Nazi whisperer's perspective, where it's like, yeah, you can kind of understand why he would have done that shit. You know, kind of, yeah, I mean, they should have cooled it, but, you know, you could kind of see where they were I mean, it's like, the where he goes when it's about the Nazis, as opposed to, I mean, and this is another example of something, like, he's polite when he platforms Nazis. He's polite to them. No matter what kind of shit they say, he's polite to them. Leftists, and people of color in particular, he is nasty to. And when he talks about Nazis in his hypotheticals, they're always like sort of a Michael Douglas in Falling Down sort of character that we're actually supposed to sort of sympathize with, even if, yeah, it wasn't cool what they did, but you can kind of see where they were coming from, dude. And it's like, what the fuck is this guy? And where the hell did anyone get the idea he was a leftist?
You know what I mean? Like it doesn't get brought up in any other context, right? Like, the thing that weirded me out was she just wouldn't say like they shouldn't do the ethnic cleansing. It was always kind of like
Well, because it was a completely bullshit hypothetical that was just literal fucking Nazi propaganda, and despite all the attempts that you made to put that in her mouth, she never put it in her mouth.
To them, I wouldn't agree with it, but it's up to them, kind of thing. Which is, sort of how everyone who wants to defend atrocities kind of defends atrocities. At least it's one of the big.
Or like by say that the Jews actually did control banking, dude, and maybe it's understandable, and all this shit. I mean, he is defending atrocities right there, and we saw him defending other atrocities. The use of starvation as a weapon, i.e. sanctions. I mean, that shit was dealt with. That's also in the fucking statute of the International Criminal Court. Not that any of that particularly matters, except for, like, African rulers who miss a payment. But, I mean, that's like, there's not yet been a single white guy prosecuted in the ICC. But, I mean, we heard him just, like, about an hour ago talking about how, oh, well, we need to just starve them out and bleed them out economically and, get them to their knees and stuff like that. Sort of like, actually Germany, tried to do to, Britain during World War II, except that their submarine fleet sucked and they didn't have any air support for it, so they lost their codes way to like 2 years before the war was out, and so everybody knew exactly where their submarines were, and so they just ended up falling apart very slowly. But, I mean, it's like, anytime he moves close to a Nazi argument, there's a level of understanding towards it that is really remarkable and telling. And with that, it is now 2 minutes before 1, so we're going to have to wrap this up. By the way, I don't have a Discord server. I haven't been keeping that a secret or something like that I haven't been mentioning a Discord server. I've just never set one up. I've never really used Discord. Am I missing out? Is Discord something I ought to be doing that, like, I think I have the program someplace, I've just never done anything with it. And, okay. That's one for my not having to learn one more fucking social media platform. I'm kind of cool with that, I'll admit. Because keeping up with Facebook and Twitter already, and YouTube as well, that's all that already involves quite a bit. Okay, good communities there. Well, maybe I'll look into it. Oh. It's a Discord solo. Well, I have no Discord server, but, I mean, maybe I'll set one up, who knows. And now it is 1, so I will see all of you tomorrow. Shopping lists and schedules, okay. I just place orders when I figure out what I'm getting so that I never have to have shopping lists. Good night. Thank you for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you all tomorrow when I don't intend to lose my mouse. So I hope to be starting roughly on time. Good night.